Okay, so we're here finishing up perek Dalet and set the psachim. For whatever the reason was, we left it, to be done at a different time. These two last mishnayos are shtickle more divrei Agoda, and Bez Hashem Yisbarach, when we go through the Gemaras over here, I'll go through it in great depth, as we will do with everything else. Okay, so Shisha Dvarim also is Mishnah Ches in perek Dalet and psachim. Shisha Dvarim also Anshe Yerichai. The residents of Yerichai did 6 things of which the Chachamim did not approve of. Al Shleish Michu B'Yadam, 3 of these practices the Chachamim protested against them. Al Shleish Alei Michu B'Yadam, but for 3 of these minhagim that they did not protest against them. But Elohein Shalei Michu B'Yadam. First, the Mishnah lists the 3 practices, the 3 hanagas, for which the Chachamim did not protest against them. Markivin the Kalam Kalayim, they would graft date palms the entire day of Erev Pesach, even after midday. Then, when work is prohibited everywhere, what they would do is they would insert branches of a male date palm, which produces fruit, into female palms, which do not produce fruit, so that the females could become productive. To prevent financial loss to Avara Avad, work is permitted even on Chol Hamoed and certainly on Erev Pesach. The people of Yerichai maintained that failure to graft the trees at the right time would result in a loss. That was therefore mutter. The Chachamim held that this was not the case of financial loss, but they didn't protest since there was some basis for the people's actions. It wasn't totally made up. There was epis somewhere that they could rely on over here. Just interesting that the Yerichai is... There was a cherem against naming the city Yerichai. That's Ershtins. And Sveitins, we're going to hear in the Navi Shiurim that... Rachav was a gilgul of Tamar. Tamar obviously is a date palm that we're talking about over here, and it has to do with the Tamarim grow in Yerichai. That's where Rachav was based. There's a lot of Torah on this, and Mr. Shem will get to that. Then the second thing was the Karchin es Shema. They would link the first 2 psukim of Shema, meaning that they would say Shema Yisrael and then V'ahavta, without saying Baruch Shem in the middle. So what's the problem? So what's the issue over here? So Avada, there's a chiyuv to say Kriya Shema twice a day, once in the morning or once in the evening. The first parish of Shema is in Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and then continues with V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. The Chachamim were masakin that between the 2 psukim, a person should add Baruch Shem Kvod Mechusei Le'olam Voed. The people of Yerichai didn't add this pasuk. However, the Chacham didn't protest, because even one who doesn't say this pasuk still fulfills his chiyuv of reciting the Shema. Now, in the Svarim, it's called Yehuda Ilah and Yehuda Tata. One is 24 letters, one is 25 letters. There's a whole shmuz about this Ayin Tzra Harmar Pashas V'Aschanan. It's very interesting that this was the koiches that the Klal Yisrael used to be able to fight off the enemies when they were at war. That's why it says Shema Yisrael, Atem Yitzim Hayem LaMelchama. This is all in the first pshat of the Karchin Shema. The Gemara talks about this barichos. The second pshat that the Bartanura brings is Shaloi Hayu Mafsikim in Echad Ve'ahavta. They wouldn't stop between Echad and Ve'ahavta. Shetzarich Laharach Ve'echad. Person needs to say Echad longer, Lahafsik ben Malchus Shemayim l'Dvar Macherim. And there should be a pause between when you're talking about Malchus Shemayim and other things, and the people of Yerichai didn't do that. They just said it, one right into the next without giving that pause. The third thing is Koitzrin v'Goitchin l'fnei Omer. They would reap the new crop of grain and stack it before the Omer carbon was brought on the 16th of Nisan. Although the Chacham answered this out of concern, it was a gzera, the one might come to eat from the new crop, which is awesome deraisa. But these 3 practices, the Chachamim didn't protest against them. The Chadash, meaning the grain from the new crop, may not be eaten until the carbon Omer is brought on the 16th day of Nisan, which is the 2nd day of Pesach. The Chachamim were geyser that the new crop may not even be stacked in the fields before the Omer is brought, because they were concerned that the workers might eat from it. The people of Yerichai did not listen to the Rabbanon over here, but the Chachamim didn't protest against them because the chances of people eating from a new crop are small. Why is that? Because they didn't think that people would eat from it. It wasn't ready yet. You don't eat plain wheat. You eat food that's processed already. So you wouldn't eat that. These are the three practices which the Chachamim did protest against them. Number one is Matirin Gamziyah Shel Hektish. They permitted using the new growths of trees that belong to the Beis HaMikdash, because they held that the Isra of Me'ilah applies only to the tree as it was when they were Makdash it, and not to the growths that grew later. Ordinarily, one who benefits from Hektish is Mayel, and is over the Isra Deraisa of Me'ilah. However, the people of Yericha permitted benefit in this case because they followed the Shita and Me'ilah. The Me'ilah doesn't apply to that which grows from an item after it was given to the Beis HaMikdash. So there is a sort of a makam to be saying mechandik, but the Chachamim were meicha, because even if the growths are not mechuyev, are not going to be part of the chiyuv deraisa of Me'ilah, but they're also midrabanan, as the Gemara speaks out. But Archlin mitachas hanasharim b'Shabbos, they would eat the fallen fruit from beneath the trees on Shabbos because they might have fallen off the tree before Shabbos and aren't muktzah. The Chachamim were meicha because it's possible that they fell on Shabbos, and that possibility suffices to make them osir. Objects that are not expected to be used on Shabbos are classified as muktzah, which means set aside. The Chachamim were geyser that such objects may not be moved on Shabbos. A fruit on a tree is muktzah because it's also to detach it from a tree on Shabbos. Moreover, even if it fell off the tree on Shabbos, it's still muktzah because something that was muktzah when Shabbos began remains muktzah throughout the day of Shabbos. The people of Yericha ate fruits that they found under the trees on Shabbos, although they didn't know whether the fruits had fallen off and are muktzah, or before Shabbos, on Shabbos, and are muktzah, or before Shabbos and are not muktzah. They paskin that such fruits are mutter because the sveik is arbon l'kula, because any doubt of a rabbinical rule is going to be mutter. The Chacham, however, held that muktzah is an exception to this rule. Shaila is why Mishabura talks about it in Tav Tzadi Zayin, Ayin Sham. V'noisnin peah layerek. And they would give peah from vegetables, even though the chiyuv of peah does not apply to vegetables. The Chacham were meicha because if people think that it's peah, then they wouldn't take off meiser. And for these three practices, the Chachamim were meicha against them. So what's this last thing with peah? So peah is part of the growing crop that a farmer must leave standing for the poor people to take. Produce that's peah does not need to be gemaiset. There's no chiyuv to take trumas and meises from it. The chiyuv of peah does not apply to vegetables. Therefore, even if a farmer designated part of his vegetable field as peah, the vegetables that grew there still need to take off meiser. The people take the vegetables, however, will not realize this, and they'll eat them in their state of tevel, which is going to be usr and be problematic. Again, the Gemara goes through all these things by arichos and psachim, and Mr. Hashem will learn the Gemara there. We'll go through it a little more in depth. Mishnah Tes. This Mishnah is similar to the idea of the previous Mishnah, and over here we're discussing 6 ideas, 6 things that were performed by Chizkiyahu HaMelech, al shleisha haidulei, al shleisha lo haidulei, 3 things that they did not agree with, that the Chacham did not agree with what he did, and 3 things that they did agree with. Now this is interesting because this is not just here in Psachim, but elsewhere in Shas, the Gemara discusses Parichos. This is brought in Psachim, in Brachas on the Avyuram and Beis. And Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha to learn it, the Iyun Gadol, Iyun Rav, and get a really geshmak Torah over here. But maybe we'll share a little bit of it, but the Ikar is we'll share it when we learn the Gemara. So let's start. Shisha Dvarim Asa Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Chizkiyahu HaMelech did 6 things. Al Shleisha Haidulai, the Chacham agreed with him concerning 3 things. Val Shleisha Lo Haidulai, they did not agree with him concerning the other 3. Although the Chachamim disapproved of these 3 actions, they did not give him Musar, because he did them only once. The people of Yericha, however, were given Musar because their practices were ongoing. Now, what's interesting is that different places in Chazal, I believe in the Yerushalmi has a different list of different ideas of what happened with Chizkiyahu HaMelech, but which we'll discuss that more in depth when we learn the Gemara Be'ez Hashem. Number 1 is Gerer Atzmus Avav Al Mita Shel Chavalim. He dragged the bones of his father Achaz to the grave on a bed of ropes, and not on a bed that befits a king, so that the disgrace would atone for the Averus that Achaz did. Chizkiyahu's father Achaz was the previous king of Yehuda. He served Avodah Zarah, and he led people to abandon the service of Hashem, Avodas Hashem. And interesting, because Chizkiyahu created a tremendous phenomena of Torah, and Chizkiyahu himself was a tremendous Eved Hashem, being like Rabbi Zara, promoting Torah learning to unbelievable extents. But he was involved in a lot of things, and some things we see here that the Chachamim did not agree with. But over here with Ger Atzmus Aviv, he did that as a kapara for his father. So it was actually not only with the Chachamim made to him, but his father was also made to him from the fact that his father was able to get a kapara in Olam Haba, and it would be a kapara for him, but then the other Rishonim would see it and maybe take it to heart. There's it was even part of Kibbutz Av, because he was helping his father get into Gan Eden. It's a horrible thing that he had to do it this way, but that's what happened. V'hoidulai, and the Chachamim agreed with him. Number 2, Kites Nechash and Necheshes, V'hoidulai. He crushed the copper snake that Moshe Rabbeinu made because people were worshipping it, and the Chachamim agreed with him. Now, what's the problem when people were worshipping it? So when Klal Yisrael was in the Midbar, they complained about the man, and Hashem sent the Nechashim against them. After they did tshuva, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to make a seil chasar for sima se'al neis, kol hanoshach v'roi sevachai. In later years, people mistakenly thought that the object itself had healing powers and began worshipping it. Chizkiyahu therefore destroyed it. That's very interesting, because if we take a look at the Rambam says that this was the mistake of how Avodah Zarah came about to begin with. There's something that was intermediary, or something that would be Messiah, a person davening or in achieving Gevissa, and then you take that and make that into the Ikar, becomes very problematic. Number 3 was Gonaz Sefer Rufus V'Hadulay. He hid the book of remedies, and the Chacham agreed with him. So what's the problem with that? So let's see the Rav. The Rav talks about this, and there's a lot to say about this Gonaz Sefer Rufus. So the Rav says like this: people wouldn't be machnia when they would get sick. The point of getting sick, the point of why Akash Baruch Hu makes people get sick, is so that they should daven to him, and they should accept the musar of getting sick and correct their ways. But people weren't doing that. They were just opening the Sefer Rufus. Okay, drink broccoli tea for 6 Thursdays straight, and then the cold will go away. Fine, so people did that. So they weren't machnia because they knew that there was always an automatic refuah. But Rambam Pirush, the Rambam explained that Sefer Rufus was a Sefer Moidia, Minyan Eitzuris HaKachav V'Talsamois. It has to do with a lot of astrology and different formations of stars. That at certain times, certain things help for certain refuahs. And people would think that this is more Avodah Zarah, so people would start following after it, so then they would be going as it. It's actually interesting because the Rambam here has a big arichos, because Rashi explains in the Gemara that people weren't davening when they got sick. So, they would rely on this. So, in fact, the Rambam, what's the bayah if a person doesn't, it's not necessarily a chesaron. People go to doctors. Why is this different than going to a doctor? Nothing wrong with going to a doctor. So this opens up a whole shaila, a whole slew of shailas that come up in Yonei Refuah. Mekanshanit and Rishus L'Refi L'Rapis, the Gemara says in a bunch of places. So what's the idea of that? But the pshat is, there might be, according to some, that when a person is in need, he's allowed to go to a doctor. I understand them that he's allowed to go to a doctor, but he should go to a doctor. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it is manic developed in a certain teva that if you take certain medications and the doctor tells you what to do, you're allowed to listen to the doctors. And in many cases, you should listen to the doctors. There's also this, and it's good to know that doctors are boss of a dumb. They're professionals, and hopefully they're good at what they do. But many times, especially if they're baligaiva, they're prone to make mistakes just like anybody else. And we unfortunately know many stories of people that suffered tremendously at the hands of doctors that were not machnia, were not serious of the Hashem, or they believed in medicine more than they believed in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which poses a whole bunch of other type issues. But I'll call upon him. It's a very interesting shmuz, what the chisaron is of the Sefer Rufus B'tzad Atzmai. There's another understanding of what the Rambam is saying, and that is that I believe the Rambam himself mentions this over here in the Pirsham Shnayos, that what happened was that if I open up a medical book from 400 years ago, besides for the fact it's probably not going to be written in English, and I'll have a difficult time, understanding the language in it, but I might not get it accurately. And if I don't get it accurately, I could take the wrong substances for the refuah, and then that could lead to bad outcomes. And just very practical. It wasn't a geah to be semich on these refuahs anymore. I mean, we know that Kivega brings a maril in Shabbos that about the refuahs to the Gemara, the refuahs bismana Gemara. Could be worked for them, but it doesn't necessarily work for us now. It's not something that we should necessarily look after and follow after. Hagam, there are interesting things that may have close shaykhs or some shaykhs to some ideas of modern medicine. Also today people are being a little more open-minded when it comes to medicine, that they'd be willing to, and not necessarily seek alternative methods, or alternative medicine, but to seek alternative, be more open to the not so typical Western medicine, and be a little more open to Eastern type medication. Okay, that's the story with the Gana Sefer Refuahs. So that was all good. He was praised for the Chachamim. Haidulai, they praised him for it. They agreed with him. They praised him for it. But it's actually interesting. What's the makar of the Sefer Refuahs? Where did it come from? So it's brought down from Rishonim already that when Noach was in the Teva, there were shadim in there, and it would be pretty rough to be in a Teva with all kinds of animals, with all kinds of things for Ganzi Yar. So one of the Malachim came and presented Noach with the Sefer Refuahs. That's one of the stories of where it comes from. Okay. They did not agree with Chizkiah HaMelech concerning the following three things. He cut down the doors of the Beis HaMikdash that were made of gold and sent them to the king of Ashur as a payment for tribute. The Chacham did not agree with him because he should have relied on Hashem to provide the required money. Sennacherib Melech Ashur demanded large sums of gold and silver from Chizkiah in return for removing the army from the southern kingdom of Yehuda. Because Chizkiah was unable to collect the full amount, he sent Sennacherib to the doors of the Beis HaMikdash, which were made of gold. The Chachamim objected because they held that Chizkiah should have relied on Hashem to provide the funds in a way that would not disgrace the Beis HaMikdash. What's the tain over here? The tain really is because Chizkiah was a tremendous Baal B'tachim. He said by the war against Sennacherib B'chlal, that when all of Sennacherib's army died out, was killed that night, which was a Pesach, that he said, I'm going to be lying in my bed, Hashem's going to take care of it. So if that's how you fight a war, by lying in your bed and Hashem's going to take care of it, so then if you need money, you could lie in your bed and Hashem could send them the money. Why don't you do that? So because he didn't do that, there was to give us a tain on him. He should have had b'tachin, stronger b'tachin over here as well. The second thing, Shalai Haidulai, was Sasam Megicha and Elian V'Lahaidulai. He stopped the waters of the upper Gicha and said the army of Melech Ashur coming to siege Yerushalayim should not have drinking water, but the Chacham didn't agree with him because he should have been Seimech that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would protect the city as Hashem promised. When the army of Sennacherib was approaching to attack Yerushalayim, Chizkiah stopped up the Gichon River, which is near the city, to deny the enemy soldiers a supply of drinking water. The Chachamim did not approve of this because Chizkiah should have put his trust in Hashem, who promised that he'll protect the city to save it. Iber Nisan ben Nisan v'lohadullah. He prolonged the year by adding a month to Nisan and Nisan, meaning he added an extra month to the year, making it a leap year after Nisan had begun. But the Chacham did not agree with him because the general halacha is Anan Kaimelan Ein Ma'aber Nes Hashana B'Shleishim Shel Adar Hoil V'Roil Kavei Nisan. And once Nisan has begun, it's too late to add an extra month, and that means that even if the month didn't actually start, but it's right before Nisan, it's too late. The Jewish months are based on a lunar system, which means that each month coincides with the revolution of the moon around the earth. 12 of these months form a regular year. However, such years about 11 days shorter than a solar year, which is the time it takes for the earth to go around the sun. The difference between the lunar and the solar years presents a problem with regard to the Yom Tovim, because the Yom Tovim must fall on certain dates of the lunar months, yet they also must be in particular seasons which are determined by the solar year. Pesach, for example, always starts on the 15th of Nisan, must always be in the spring. If no adjustments are made, the monthly dates of the Yom Tovim would gradually shift away from the required seasons. So to prevent the shift, an extra month is added to every second or third year, making it a leap year. so that the lunar and solar years become aligned more closely. The new month starts immediately after the month of Adar, and it's called Adar Sheni. Each year, a special Bezdin will decide whether to add a month to that year. Nowadays, the timing of the leap year is determined by a fixed calendar that was made by Hillel, Kayadu, as we spoke in Rosh Hashanah. The decision to add a month must be made before the last day of the month of Adar and not later, otherwise we wouldn't do that. And again, all these things are discussed by Arichos in the Gemara, Sai here in Psachim, Sai in Brachos, and elsewhere. Okay, Adkan.